Hello, everyone. I'm taking the opportunity that the sun is back to do this video outside to discuss two other authors. They're pretty much from the same generation. The first one is Juan Valera. We know him mostly for his work as an ambassador and a politician. He was on the side a writer, didn't publish a whole lot, but his novel Pepita Jimenez was quite a scandalous novel. For those of you who've read it, the story of a young widow falling in love with the son of the man that she's supposed to marry. It's kind of an archetypical story, right? We've seen other love triangle where the father, the son, and another woman can be the center of the tragedy. Let's think, for example, of Phèdre in Racine, right, in France, but also contemporary stories, right? This is some kind of archetype in narratives across the world. And of course, it questions a lot the religious vocation, such as we had in La Religieuse by Diderot, remembering at the same time that a clerigo, which Luis is a clerigo, is more of an administrative function in the church than a sacramental function. And then on the other side, we have Benito Pérez Galdós in his novel, one of his most famous novel, most read, Doña Perfecta, which comes from the tradition of journalism, right? And both those novels were first published in episodes in newspapers, right? So they were considered back then to be an entertainment section of the newspaper toward the end. Galdos is, of course, a realist. When we think about Spanish realism, he's the first name that pops in our head. Also known for very big novels like Fortunata y Jacinta. So the realist tradition coming from Charles Dickens in England or from Honoré de Balzac in France, right, reaches Spain through writers like Galdos. Juan Valera doesn't follow the same model, and for those of you that have the opportunity maybe to study for both those novels for the comps, you can see that there's quite a difference in the narration. In Pepita Jimenez, we have a division of different letters and different writings. So we don't have this third person omniscient narrator as we have in Doña Perfecta. Doña Perfecta as a narrator that is very paternal. As you can notice from the very beginning, we have indications that the narrator is a bit of a journalist, right? For the tone, for the kind of observations, and for this constant description of physical characteristics and also places, right? So Pepe Rey is, of course, the symbol of the new generation, the one that is embracing modernity, that lives in Madrid, that is very friendly with progress, right? This idea of progress, this idea of industrial development, that has ambition to reform Spain, and then he penetrates Orbajosa, this old city that doesn't even exist on the map, right? This is all of an invention from Galdos, and the names of the cities are completely invented. Villa Horrenda, Orbajosa, right? The old city, something we see also in Clarín, in his big novel, La Regenta, right? Which takes place in Oviedo, but the names of cities and other places are being changed, which is a very common thing in realism and naturalism. So again, this kind of archetypical novel made of archetypes, right? Doña Perfecta being, of course, a symbol of the old traditional, very religious, Catholic, superstitious, austere, strict, rigid. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of adjectives to describe Doña Perfecta. And the clash that we have between Doña Perfecta and Pepe Rey, which is going to lead to the tragic death of the young man, sorry for the spoiler, is, of course, Galdos' way to demonstrate that the two Spains, again, we're back in this conflict of las dos Españas, are constantly a clash, right? The conservative, rural Catholic versus the urban, liberal, and influenced again by ideas coming from France, from England, from Germany, who has moved on from religious practices, right? So very interesting tensions, sometimes tension that we can observe within the characters themselves, and their dilemmas, their negotiation against a different paradigm, right? This is what we have in Galdos. You also observe that at that time, the realist movement is largely influenced, again, coming back to this, by the journalistic style, right? So authors are looking for, like Flaubert did with Madame Bovary. Madame Bovary was inspired by a real story. Authors are looking for the fait divers, right? In French, that means the common people's story, a tragic story, which usually is a good beginning for journalists to invent a lot of facts around the facts that they've been able to identify in real life, and built on those facts in order to craft a longer fiction, right? So anyway, we will talk in class today about the connection, of course, between naturalism, realism, independent figures such as Flaubert, independent figures such as Juan Valera, and how they depict characters that are representative of an entire nation, right? And after, after the generation of writers, so Valera publishes Pepita Jimenez in, I believe, 1872, and Doña Perfecta is published 2 years later as a single volume. We can identify some kind of exhaustion with imitation of the French model. And by the end of the 19th century, Spain will, the intellectuals of Spain will unite to kind of find a way to not constantly imitate the French models, right? Which we'll see later, but we'll have an opportunity to talk about it today. So thank you for watching those 2 videos, and we'll see you at 5 p.m. On Skype to discuss those 4